And welcome to News Across Nigeria. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Coming up on the program today, Kaduna teachers take to the streets in an anti-government protest. More on the Benue herdsmen crisis. Amnesty International puts part of the blame on climate change. And Delta youth protest the outcome of the just concluded local government elections. Once again, welcome to News Across Nigeria. Police and other security operatives have their hands full in Kaduna following the strike action by teachers in the state. Security operatives mounted surveillance at major roads and the NLC secretariats in the state capital to prevent the NUT from going ahead with the strike. Policemen were also drafted along the Kaduna-Abuja highway to prevent NLC members from other states and the FCT from entering Kaduna State for the anti-government protest. Meanwhile, NLC officials from the National Secretariat and labor leaders of affiliate unions from the 36 states of the Federation are all readying the state to take part in the rally.
People determined can never be defeated, and therefore we are determined. We will make our point. We will submit our letter of protest. If they like, they should act. But I think it's a welcome development because workers have seen that despite our olive hand of fellowship to try to see how those issues are resolved on the table, we have seen that with impunity, the decision of the National Industrial Court is being set aside. With impunity, people are not allowed to exercise their freedom of association. This is not what we bargained for.
Amnesty International has spoken about the herdsmen situation in Benue State, saying that climate change is partly to blame for the influx of herders. Director of Amnesty International in Nigeria, Osai Ojiho, says that the dry weather condition, which affects rivers and vegetation, forces the herders and their cattle to move to greener pastures.
One of the factors that is causing some of these issues that we're seeing is climate change. We need to recognize that in the past, the sort of greenery and the sort of vegetation we had has changed. And the North has also experienced greatly a change in the way climate change has actually affected water sources, land, and vegetation. And we as a people need to start thinking about how to combat climate change. What are the options? What are the alternatives? Those discussions need to be had in addition to how you ensure that a people's livelihood can move beyond a situation of conflict as a result of finding alternatives in order to carry out their trade, but rather to live in harmony with other people. And those discussions need to be facilitated in a mutually respecting manner. And most importantly, there needs to be a prevention of further attacks. And this can only happen if a long-term strategy is put in place to ensure that when people move from place to place, because today we're talking about herders and farmers conflicts, we're also going to see a shift also between urban and rural populations. That has already started happening. And in a couple of years, you'll find that more people live in urban areas than rural areas. Then what happens in those situations? How do we deal with rising crime levels in the cities? So the solution is a holistic view to ensure you can prevent people from taking the rights of others, especially when you talk about life, someone's life. It's a crime and it's something that should be prevented. And then for those that have happened in the past, you need to be able to address it. Because in a law-abiding society, people need to feel that everybody is treated equally and everybody has equal standing before the law. And at the moment, that situation is not clear at all. And we need to do a lot more as a people, as a government, to ensure that we can offer this kind of protection and this kind of assurance. And it will only happen if perpetrators of crimes or violations are brought to book and the communities are repatriated and are given enough resources in order to address their socioeconomic needs.
Nobel laureate Professor Wale Soyinka has warned President Muhammadu Buhari to learn from history and stop treating the ravaging herdsmen with kid gloves. Professor Soyinka also described the incessant attacks by herdsmen in many parts of the country as a declaration of war on Nigeria. The Nobel laureate gave his position through a statement, also warned the president to avoid falling into a similar pit that befell his predecessor in office when the Chibok girls were kidnapped from their school in 2014. In his words, quote, "We have been here before now, before is back with a vengeance." President Goodluck Jonathan refused to accept the murders that had carried off the nation's daughters. President Muhammadu Buhari and his government, including his Inspector General of Police in near identical denial, appear to believe that killer herdsmen who strike again and again at will from one corner of the nation to the other are merely hot-tempered citizens whose scraps occasionally degenerate into communal clashes. Reacting to comments credited to the herdsmen that the killings were in defense of their stolen cows, Professor Wale Soyinka says, and I quote, "How do we assess a mental state that cannot distinguish between a stolen cow, which is always recoverable, and human life, which is not? Villages have been depopulated far wider than those outside their operational zones can conceive. They soup and sleeping settlements, kill and strut. They glory in their seeming supremacy." End of quote. The Nobel laureate says that the president needs to curb the activities of the herdsmen, and decisively too, without any further delay. There's another dimension to the story, as the Plateau State Governor Simon Lalong says that he actually warned his Benue State counterpart Samuel Ortom over the anti-open grazing law. Governor Lalong, who was in the State House to see President Muhammadu Buhari, says that the answer to the herdsmen and farmers' crisis is ranching and not the enforcement of an anti-grazing law. He says the government must invest in the venture for it to really work, which is why his state has donated parcels of land for ranching. And now joining us on the program right now to talk about this is the program senior lecturer, his Department of Geography, University of Lagos, Dr. Mayowa Fashono. Thank you very much, Dr. Fashono, for joining us on the program today. All right, we'll talk about that later, but in the meantime, when News Across Nigeria returns, we'll be going to Enugu State, where the government has received the first batch of returning migrants from Libya. Please stay with us.